The trial ground had been blessed, sanctified, and marked with white chalk lines that gleamed in the morning sun. Thousands pressed against the barricades, noble and small folk alike, come to watch men kill each other in the name of justice and pride. Dunk stood with his 6 champions and tried not to vomit. Across the field, Aerion Brightflame stood with his own 7. Prince Daeron the Drunken, already swaying slightly despite the early hour. Prince Maekar, grim-faced and silent, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Steffon Fossoway with his red apple. Sir Willem Wylde, Sir Donnel of Duskendale, Sir Roland Crakehall, massive and cruel. They looked like heroes from a song, all polished armor and perfect posture and absolute certainty. They looked like men who expected to win.
Remember, stay tight, protect each other. If we break formation, they'll cut us down one by one.
Dunk nodded, mouth too dry for words. Somewhere in the crowd, Egg watched with white knuckles and desperate eyes. The herald raised his hand.
Let the trial begin!
They crashed together like waves against rocks, 7 on 7, steel screaming and shields splintering and men roaring. Dunk found himself against Sir Willem Wylde, trading blows that rattled his teeth and numbed his arms. Beside him, Raymond Fossoway went down with a spear in his thigh, screaming. 6 on 7 now. Dunk bulled forward, using height and weight to drive his opponent back, and caught a mace across his shoulder that would have taken his arm off if his pauldron hadn't caught it. Pain exploded white-hot, but he stayed upright, stayed swinging. A horn blast. Someone else down, Harding, clutching his side. 5 on 7. The world narrowed to blood and dirt, and the next swing, the next block, the next desperate attempt to stay alive. Dunk lost track of time, lost track of everything except the weight of his sword, and the scream of metal, and the awful knowledge that they were losing. Then he heard Egg shout, not words, a scream of pure terror that cut through the battle like a knife. Dunk's head snapped around. Across the field, past the fighting, he saw Aerion break away from the melee and sprint toward the crowd, toward where Egg stood.
No!
He ran, armor dragging at him, lungs burning. Saw Aerion reach Egg, saw the prince's hand close around the boy's collar, saw that terrible smile.
This is what happens to those who serve fools.
The knife came up, silver and sharp. Egg's eyes went wide, and the world caught fire. It started with shadow, not the gentle darkening of a passing cloud, but a sudden, absolute dimming of the sun, as if something vast and ancient had stepped between the earth and the heavens and claimed the light for its own. The tourney ground plunged into premature twilight, and for one heartbeat, the only sound was the whisper of wind through canvas and the labored breathing of exhausted men. Then came the wind itself, not a breeze, not even a gale. A maelstrom of displaced air that hit the field like a titan's fist, tearing banners from their poles, ripping pavilions from the ground, sending loose helms and shields tumbling across the chalk lines like children's toys. Women screamed, horses shrieked, knights staggered and fell to their knees under the sudden impossible pressure. Dunk looked up. The sky had wings. Nightwander descended from the sun like a falling star wrapped in midnight. Wings spread so wide they seemed to stretch from horizon to horizon. 80 feet of living shadow and scale and ancient fury, diving toward the tourney ground with the focused inevitability of a stooping falcon. The wind of its passage tore at Dunk's hair, at his surcoat, at the very breath in his lungs. The dragon's roar split the world in half. It wasn't sound. It was pressure. It was heat. It was the voice of something so far beyond human comprehension that Dunk's knees buckled and his sword fell from nerveless fingers. The roar shook the ground. It rattled bones. It reached inside every chest and squeezed hearts until they forgot how to beat. All across the field, men dropped their weapons and pressed hands to their ears. Blood trickled from noses. A horse collapsed mid-scream, eyes rolling white. And still, Nightwander dove. Dunk saw every detail with the terrible clarity of impending death. scales like polished obsidian, each the size of his hand, teeth longer than daggers, gleaming in a jaw that could swallow a man whole, eyes like molten gold, fixed on one target, with the burning focus of a god pronouncing judgment. Aerion Brightflame, frozen with his knife still raised, staring up at his own extinction, the dragon's claws extended. For one eternal moment, Dunk was certain he was about to watch a prince of the blood torn apart like parchment. Nightwander came in low and fast, talons spread wide enough to pluck a mounted knight from his saddle. And then Egg's voice cut through the chaos.
Nightwander! Costalus!
The words were High Valyrian, sharp and commanding, and they hit the dragon like a physical blow. Nightwander's wings snapped open, a sound like thunder, like sails catching hurricane wind, and the creature pulled up hard, barely 10 feet above the ground. The displacement of air was catastrophic. The shockwave flattened the crowd in a wave, sent the trial combatants sprawling, ripped the tourney stands halfway from their foundations. Dunk hit the ground hard enough to see stars, felt the earth tremble as Nightwander landed with a crash that shook dust from Ashford's walls a mile away. When he could see again, the dragon stood in the center of the trial ground, close enough to touch. Real. Gods, it was real. Nightwander's bulk dwarfed everything. Horses, knights, pavilions. Its tail lashed behind it, carving furrows in the blessed earth. Smoke poured from its nostrils in thick, sulphurous clouds. The membrane of its wings, now fully healed, glowed faintly translucent where sunlight caught them, showing the intricate pattern of veins and bone like the most delicate stained glass. And its eyes, those terrible, beautiful, ancient eyes, they burned with an intelligence that made Dunk want to weep and kneel and run all at once. This wasn't an animal. This was something that remembered when the Valyrian freehold had stood in all its terrible glory. Something that had chosen to sleep when the world forgot magic, and had woken now to find itself the last of its kind. Something that had bonded to a 12-year-old boy and would burn kingdoms to keep him safe. The silence was absolute. 10,000 people had stopped breathing, stopped thinking, stopped being anything but witnesses to the return of an age they thought dead and buried. Then Aerion Brightflame's bladder gave way, and the spreading stain on his silk breeches was the only movement in the entire field. Nightwander's head swung toward him with reptilian smoothness. The dragon's jaw cracked open an inch, not a roar, but something worse, a considering hiss, like a serpent deciding whether to strike or savor the fear a moment longer. The glow in its throat pulsed brighter. Orange, red, white, gold. Heat shimmered in the air. The ground beneath Nightwander's bulk began to smoke.
Please,
Aerion whimpered. The knife fell from his fingers.
please,
Nightwander!
Egg's voice was soft now, gentle, but it carried in the silence like a bell in an empty temple. The boy walked toward the dragon with slow, measured steps, not showing fear, not showing hesitation, just walking like he did this every day. Like approaching a creature that could end the world was the most natural thing imaginable.
Nightwander!
He said again, and this time Dunk heard the tremor underneath.
Costylus, I'm all right, see? I'm not hurt. You came, you saved me, but you can't burn him. Not yet. Not like this.
The dragon's eye, vast and golden and impossibly deep, swiveled to focus on Egg. For a long moment they stared at each other, and Dunk could almost see the conversation happening in that gaze, could see the dragon's fury pressing against Egg's desperate calm. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, Nightwander lowered its head. Egg touched the warm scales at its jaw, and the dragon's eyes slid half-closed. The tension broke like cut rope. People gasped. Someone sobbed. Horses screamed their relief, but nobody moved. Nobody dared.
My name is Aegon Targaryen,
Egg said, still stroking Nightwander's jaw, his voice carrying across the silent field.
fourth son of Prince Maekar, grandson of King Daeron II.
He looked up, eyes bright and defiant.
And this is Nightwander, last of the dragons, who chose me when I thought the world had no more magic left.
Prince Maekar staggered forward, face white as bone.
Aegon, what have you done?
What I had to.
Egg's hand never stopped moving on those scales.
It was dying, father. Hidden and hurt and alone. Would you have left it?
I would have told someone.
Who? The mesters who say magic is dead, the lords who'd hunt it for sport.
Egg's voice cracked.
It was chained, Father. Someone kept it in chains and hurt it, and it escaped and it was dying. And Sir Duncan and I, we couldn't just walk away.
Maekar's jaw worked. He looked at the dragon, at his son, at the knife still lying in the dirt near Aerion's feet. Understanding dawned slowly, terribly.
Aerion was going to...
Yes.
Egg's voice went flat.
And Nightwander felt it. Through me. It knew I was in danger.
Another figure pushed through the crowd. Prince Baylor, blood running from a cut on his brow, moving with careful deliberation. He stopped at a respectful distance from the dragon and bowed.
Nightwander, well met.
The dragon's eyes fixed on him, measuring. Then, incredibly, it dipped its head a fraction, acknowledging him. Baylor's smile was fierce and proud.
My nephew has always had surprising taste in companions.
He looked at Maekar.
This changes everything, brother.
I know.
The realm will...
I know.
Around them, the crowd was coming back to life. Whispers became murmurs, became a rising tide of wonder and terror and desperate speculation. Dunk heard fragments. Impossible. Dragons are back! The Targaryens. Burn us all. Nightwander rumbled, smoke curling from its nostrils, and the crowd pressed back like a tide running from shore.
Peace.
Baylor called out, voice ringing with command.
Everyone, peace. The dragon has shown restraint. It has not harmed anyone. It came to protect one of the blood royal, and it succeeded. There will be no more violence today.
The trial, someone started.
Is over.
Baylor's voice cut like steel.
Prince Aerion drew steel on a member of the royal family and threatened his life in full view of hundreds of witnesses. I'd say that settles the matter of justice quite thoroughly.
His eyes found Dunk.
Sir Duncan is cleared of all charges. His honor is beyond question.
Dunk's knees nearly buckled with relief.
Thank you, my prince.
Don't thank me. Thank your squire and his remarkable friend.
Aerion finally found his voice.
It's a monster. It should be.
Nightwander's head whipped around so fast, Dunk barely saw it move. The dragon lunged forward, closing the distance to Aerion in a single bound that shook the earth and roared directly into the prince's face. The sound was so loud, so impossibly vast, that Dunk felt his teeth vibrate in his skull. Heat washed over them like standing before an open forge. Aerion's hair crisped at the edges. His skin went red, and he screamed, high and thin and utterly broken.
Nightwander!
Egg's voice cracked like a whip.
Enough!
The dragon pulled back, but its eyes never left Aerion. The message was clear. I could have. I chose not to. Remember that. Aerion collapsed, sobbing.
Get him out of here before I let the beast finish what it started.
Knights scrambled to obey, dragging the beautiful prince away like a sack of turnips. In the silence that followed, Baylor approached his nephew and knelt in the dirt beside him.
You realize what you've done, Aegon?
Changed everything?
Egg's voice was small.
Yes.
Baylor gripped his shoulder.
The realm believes dragons are extinct. The crown has ruled without them for 50 years, and now you appear with one bonded to you, loyal to you, ready to burn anyone who threatens you. You're one of the most dangerous people in Westeros, nephew, and you're 12 years old.
Egg looked stricken.
I just wanted to help it, to save it.
I know.
Baylor's voice gentled.
And that's why this might actually work, because you didn't do it for power. You did it because it was right.
Nightwander rumbled, settled itself more comfortably, and wrapped its tail in a loose circle around Egg and Baylor both, protecting them, claiming them. Dunk finally forced his legs to move, stumbled over to stand beside Egg. The boy looked up at him with desperate eyes.
I'm sorry, Sir Duncan. I tried to keep it hidden. I tried to...
Dunk rested a hand on Egg's shoulder.
You saved both our lives. Nothing to apologize for.
But now everyone knows, and they'll come for Nightwander. They'll want to, well, I know about the stories that came from the dragon pit after Rhaenyra.
Let them try.
Dunk's voice came out harder than he'd intended. He looked at the dragon, at its scales still smoking faintly with banked fire, at the casual way it could level an army.
I'd like to see them succeed.
Nightwander's eye fixed on him, and for a moment, Dunk felt the weight of that ancient intelligence measuring him, judging him, deciding if he was worthy of the trust Egg had placed in him. Then the dragon made a sound, low and rumbling, almost approving. Egg laughed, shaky but genuine.
It likes you.
Wonderful. I'm popular with creatures that can eat me in one bite.
Around them, the tourney ground was transforming into something else entirely. Lords and ladies pressed forward despite their fear, drawn by wonder and terror in equal measure. Knights who'd been fighting moments ago now stood side by side, staring at the impossible made flesh. And somewhere in the crowd, Dunk heard someone start to sing. It was an old song, one he barely remembered from childhood, about dragons and riders and the age of heroes. Within moments, others joined in, and the melody rose across Ashford Meadow like smoke from a sacred fire. Dragons were back, magic had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. Word reached King's Landing within 3 days. The response was complicated. King Daeron II, old and wise and weary beyond his years, summoned Maekar and his son to court immediately. The small council panicked and began drafting legislation about dragon ownership. The faith called it a sign from the gods, though they couldn't agree if it was blessing or curse. And the lords, the lords had opinions. Some saw opportunity. A Targaryen prince with a dragon could be a useful ally. Others saw threat. Dragons had burned kingdoms before. Why not again? A few brave or foolish souls suggested killing the beast before it became a problem. Those suggestions stopped after Nightwander incinerated a hunting party that tried to verify the dragon's existence by attacking it with crossbows. Nobody died. Egg saw to that, commanding Nightwander to burn their weapons and horses instead of the men themselves. But the message was clear. Harm the dragon, pay the price. The realm learned to be careful. 6 months later, Dunk stood in the courtyard of the Red Keep and watched Egg work with Nightwander on controlled flight. The dragon's wing had healed fully, and it moved through the air like silk through water, graceful and powerful and absolutely terrifying.
Sir Duncan.
Prince Baylor approached, resplendent in white enamel and gold. He'd been named Hand of the King last month, which meant he was now one of the most powerful men in Westeros.
Walk with me.
They strolled the battlements while Nightwander wheeled overhead, Egg's laughter carrying on the wind.
He's happy,
Baylor observed.
Aye, as happy as a boy with a target on his back can be.
The threats have decreased. Most lords have accepted the new reality.
Most isn't all.
No.
Baylor's smile went sharp.
But the ones who haven't, well, dragons are excellent at changing minds.
Dunk snorted.
You sound like Egg.
He's a good influence. Keeps me honest.
The prince's eyes tracked his nephew's flight.
I wanted to thank you, Sir Duncan, for what you did at Ashford. If you'd walked away...
I didn't.
No, you didn't.
Baylor gripped Dunk's shoulder.
The realm needs more men like you. Men who'll do the hard thing because it's right, not because it's profitable.
I'm just...
The hedge knight who changed history? Own it, Sir Duncan. You've earned it.
They stood in silence, watching Egg and Nightwander dance against the sky. Dragons were back. Magic had returned to a world that thought itself done with wonder. And it had happened because one stubborn hedge knight and one lonely prince refused to let something precious die alone.
Think he'll be all right? Really?
Baylor considered.
I think he has a dragon that would burn the world for him. A hedge knight who'd die for him, and more courage than anyone I've ever met. If anyone can navigate what's coming.
He smiled.
It's Aegon Targaryen and his impossible friend.
High above, Nightwander roared, not in anger or pain, but in pure, wild joy. And Dunk, against all sense and reason, believed it might actually be true.